her whole top head was like gone.
Her whole what was gone?
Up ears, all gone.
The whole top of her head?
These are 13-year-old Antonio Barbeau and Nathan Paape. In 2012, they Antonio's great-grandmother and took her money to buy pizza and I know, sometimes murder motives are truly outrageous, but how did two young teens come together with such a morbid plan? And how did their interrogators break down the whole story in just a matter of hours? This is the full story of Antonio Barbeau and Nathan Paape. Today's story takes place in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. It's a small town of just under 50,000 people, spread along the coast of the Big Lake, Michigan, and known as a great weekend getaway spot. Places like Sheboygan are not used to high crime rates, let alone people disappearing. Before 2012, the last murder was in 1996, and there are only 1 or 2 first-degree homicides in all of Sheboygan County per year on average. So when 78-year-old Barbara Olson didn't show up at her daughter Judy's house, Judy got worried. Ever since she'd retired, Barbara would visit Judy at her home every morning, with very few exceptions. And then she would call and explain why she couldn't make it. But on Tuesday, September 18th, 2012, there was no sign from Barbara. And on Wednesday, she didn't contact Judy either. When Judy called Barbara, she didn't pick up. In the afternoon, Judy visited Barbara's home and lifted the garage door, attempting to enter the house via the garage. The first thing she noticed was that Barbara's car was gone. Then she took a few more steps and entered the house. A few minutes later, the emergency services received a very distressing call.
Please send an ambulance and the police. My mother is laying in the garage and there's a lot of blood and there's a blanket over her head. There's a lot of blood.
How did the blanket get over her
I
head?
have no idea.
And how old is your mother?
She is 78.
And is she breathing?
I don't know. I can't look. The blanket is over her head and I can't look.
Okay, who's there with you?
I hope it's not the neighbor.
Okay, can the neighbor check if she's breathing?
Oh,
You don't have to go and look. You don't have to go. If your neighbor can just go and check if she's breathing.
Okay, they would like you to.
Are you sending somebody?
I'm working on it. I need to know if she's breathing.
There was so much that there was a thick trail from Barbara's body all the way into the living room. Her arms and legs were extremely bruised, and the rest was hidden with a blanket. Perhaps this was for the best. It was hard enough for Judy to find her like this. When the paramedics arrived, they lifted the blanket only to find Barbara's head wrapped in a plastic bag. Inside the bag was Barbara's head. She was hardly recognizable, and the top of her head was severed. The autopsy would reveal a hatchet and a hammer had been used as murder weapons. The police knew they were looking for a real-life monster. To draw a suspect pool, the detectives looked at Barbara's life and all the people she interacted with regularly. She worked as a volunteer driver for elderly people in Sheboygan Falls. She was a peaceful person with lots of friends, and she loved gardening. Clearly, the elderly she drove through Sheboygan Falls every day wouldn't want her dead. And since all her other relationships were with her close family and neighbors, the police ran out of leads. Barbara didn't have any enemies, and she wasn't rich either, so her house wouldn't have attracted break-ins either. Without a lot of hope or optimism, the detectives looked at Barbara's family when they discovered her great-grandson, 13-year-old Antonio Barbeau, and they scoured through local CCTV from September 18th, where they saw multiple instances of Antonio and his bestie, Nate Paape. The police sought out the two boys at school initially just to ask them about potential leads. But when they looked inside Antonio's locker, they discovered bloody clothes and shoes. On September 19th, Nate was interviewed at home, and the following day, Antonio was brought over for questioning, but he was already in custody for a previous offense.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, you can read fine, correct?
Yeah.
All right, first of all, can I get your name? It's Antonio Barbeau, is that how you pronounce it?
Antonio Barbeau.
The detective began his interrogation with a friendly tone, making Antonio feel comfortable and establishing trust. He also didn't tell Antonio he was a murder suspect yet. He just asked him to help the police clear some things out.
There was a serious incident involving your great-grandmother, I believe. Do you know who that would be?
On
her name
my
is?
side. My side?
Yeah, I think it is.
Then Grandma Barb.
Okay, what's her... Is it grandma or great-grandma?
I just say grandma.
But is she your grandma or is she a
She's
great-grandma?
my great grandma.
Okay.
Antonio claimed he'd last seen Barbara over a month ago, but the moment he started lying, his body language changed. His relaxed posture and calm voice turned to fidgeting, touching his face and making long thinking sounds.
When's the last time you were at her house, Grandma or Great-Grandma Barb Olson's?
Probably last time I went over there to work for her, which would probably be about 2 months ago. I remember I went over there, I put some leaves.
But Antonio also mentioned he hadn't seen his grandma for over a month because he was in trouble. And when the detectives asked him about it, well, Antonio revealed why he was already in custody that day.
Well, I'm here because I ran from social care when I had to go to social care. Because I remember I was like, my mom was telling me, like, if I was, like, really good and all that, I'd get out sooner, all that type of stuff. And then I was there for, like, a week and a half, and, like, half a week before that, I was talking to my social worker. She said only a few days.
Now the cops knew Antonio was the insubordinate type. If he had this disregard for his social care officers, he surely was capable of doing other crimes. So the detectives moved on to the timeline of events.
Do you know what you were doing Monday? Where you were at, where you were staying? Were you at home, or where were you at on Monday during the day?
I'm quite sure I was sleeping till, like, at least 2, and then I started walking around.
Did you notice how Antonio started frantically searching and scratching his legs as he spoke about what he did on Monday? Yeah, he couldn't hide his anxiety. Eventually, Antonio told the cop he'd stayed at his friend Nate's house on Sunday night and was with him on Monday. But the detectives had already spoken to Nate at his home the day before, hours after the discovery of Barbara's body. Nate had told the police that he ran into Antonio or Tino on Tuesday, so they hung out together.
Did you know that Tino was a runaway?
Yeah,
Do you know how long he had been a runaway for?
yeah, since last week, Friday.
And did he run away from home, or does he live at his house?
No, he was in shelter care.
In shelter care?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he had to stay for another 2 weeks, and he decided just to leave. And that was like right after school. He started to run because his mom picks him up. So he just decided to go to the other side of the building.
During his interrogation, Antonio ended up telling the same story as Nate, that after he ran away from social care, he stayed with Nate for 3 nights. But it took Antonio way longer to get to the story. Initially, he acted like he didn't even remember where he was on the previous Monday. Then, all of a sudden, he was remembering clear details about what he did and about Nate's home.
And Ethan came over, like, he was like, hey, Tino, like, I haven't seen you for a while, that type of stuff. And then he was kind of like next to me, but a little behind me, so I didn't see it. And then he just like grabbed me, and then he just yells, I got him.
Tino's friend Ethan called Tino's mom, and she picked him up on Tuesday, he said. Then Antonio and his mom saw his attorney, and when he discovered there was a warrant for his arrest, he took Antonio to the police station. Now, it's important to note Antonio's criminal record. This was a turning point in the interrogation, both for Antonio and Nate. The detectives realized Antonio had the prosperity to go against authority. In fact, many of his actions pointed toward conduct disorder, a frequent precursor of antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is a particularly challenging type of personality disorder, characterized by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behavior. Someone with antisocial personality disorder will typically be manipulative, deceitful, and reckless, and will not care for other people's feelings. That all seemed correct when the detective asked Nate about Antonio's past transgressions.
What do you know about that, Nate?
I know he took money, and I don't remember the time.
How long haven't they been friends?
A couple weeks now.
Antonio even broke into his friend Nick's house to steal money from his family.
Do you know how Nick found out?
They set up cameras.
So he broke into their house more than once?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times that,
4.
4 times that Tino broke into Nick's house?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
I was with him.
Did you hear that? Finally, Nate implicated himself in Antonio's crimes. Now, the detective knew it was very likely that whatever happened to Barbara, it was Antonio and Nate's doing. But when she asked Nate about potential crimes during the last few days, he denied everything.
Okay, you guys didn't do anything against the law? No. Together since Friday?
No.
Did he tell you that he did anything against the law?
No.
The same happened during Antonio's interrogation. When the detective asked him again if he was at Barbara's home on Monday, he said no, even after the detective implied that he had witness accounts saying he was there.
So you're straight out saying, and you had said before, that the last time you saw her at all was at least a month ago?
Yeah.
So you would straight out be saying that if anybody said that they specifically saw you at your great-grandma Barb Olson's house anytime within the past 2-3 weeks or something, that they're lying?
Yeah.
Then the detective asked Tino, seemingly out of the blue, if he has any means to make money, such as a job or an allowance. You might say, hey, that's a random question, but here's the context. Antonio was raised by a single mom on low income, and since the detective knew about the multiple break-ins, he sensed that Barbara's murder might have something to do with money too.
So if you need something, if you need new clothes, if you want some soda, if you want something like that, does your mom give you the money, or how does that work, or you just don't get it, or what?
Like if it's not that much, my mom will usually get it, but otherwise, I really don't get stuff.
Sadly, the full picture was becoming quite clear, and Antonio was in the middle of it.
If I were to tell you that your great-grandma Barb Olson was killed, would that surprise you?
Tino had no reaction when he heard the news. Of course, this was no news to him, but if he wanted to look innocent, he could have shown some surprise.
I take it you're not real close to her as far as hearing that news and just...
I mean, as I said, I never talked to her that often.
Yeah. Even if you're not close to someone, hearing they got murdered will probably surprise you. But Tino was only 13 and he really didn't know the ins and the outs of the law. Even when the detective asked him if he had done any drugs lately, he said not in the last month. That could have been his easy way out. If he would have Barbara while intoxicated, he could have gotten a lighter sentence by means of diminished capacity.
You haven't used any at all since about a week ago? Something like that?
Yeah.
So, again, if I came and said that we've talked with people that had mentioned that you were smoking marijuana within a week, like within a day or two, what would be
I
that?
don't know how I would know, because when I do it, it's usually just by myself and somewhere where no one's around.
So if somebody was talking to you that said that they sold you within that week, that would be a lie?
Yeah.
Another very suspicious thing Tino did was not ask anything about Barbara. When an innocent person finds out their relative was killed, they usually want to know how and where they were found and when. Tino didn't ask anything because he already knew the hows and the whens and the wheres, but that just pointed the detective in the guilty direction.
Could there be any reason that you would have bragged to somebody or anything about stealing a car within the past couple weeks?
No.
And again, is there any reason that somebody would say that?
I don't really know.
The detective continued to press Antonio with questions, all of which he denied. That he didn't have blood on his shoes, that he never tried to clean his shoes, and that he hasn't been out to eat in months. But when the cop asked him about Theo's pizza, Antonio figured out they had CCTV footage of him and Nate eating there. So he changed his story.
Been there just 2 days ago? Maybe 3.
Oh, really?
How did you guys get to Theo's Pizza?
It's not that far of a walk.
So you just walked?
Yeah, it's not that far.
About how far?
Probably about a 30-minute walk.
And who paid for that?
Butcher Nate's, we had $20.
And where did you get that, do you know?
I remember we found that on the floor at his house.
That day or when?
I think so.
Well, it doesn't sound like you have a whole lot of money, so if you found a $20 bill, it should stick out, right?
Yeah.
So you're pretty sure that it was Tuesday that you found it on the floor at Nate?
It was either Tuesday morning when I woke up.
Finally, the detective started confronting Antonio about his dishonesty. He pointed out that it didn't make sense when Tino acted like he didn't remember very recent events. Then he told Tino he had one last chance to tell the truth. After all, they had enough evidence to convict him anyway.
I've already told you that we've talked with a lot of people, okay?
All right.
And we've had the state crime lab in, we have a lot of evidence. You know, it's a video world nowadays. We have video evidence. We have a lot of stuff, okay? And I'll tell you right now, you're not telling me the truth.
Oftentimes in interrogations, detectives bluff about having evidence in order to put pressure on the suspect and get a confession. But this detective wasn't bluffing with Tino. Just the day before, Nate had given a pretty clear account of what had happened when he was questioned at his home. As the detective got closer and closer to the main topic, she could see that Nate wanted to say the truth but was too afraid of getting in trouble. That and his mom was watching throughout the whole interrogation. Nate's mom, Bobby, was in the same room with them, but she didn't intervene at all. However, Nate could feel her watching, and he felt extra intimidated by that. So when the detective urged Nate to protect himself and not get arrested for a stupid thing Tino did, he asked for a piece of paper. He was going to write his confession instead of saying it out loud in front of his mom. As soon as the officer read it, she understood Nate now had to be arrested.
I can understand with what you wrote down. You're very scared.
Yeah.
As soon as he was read his Miranda rights, Nate broke down in tears. His mom was just a few feet away.
Realizing that you have these rights, are you now willing to answer questions or make a statement?
Yeah.
I know you wrote that down, and maybe you wrote it down because you didn't want her to hear that. Is that why you wrote that down? Okay.
Nate cried even harder when the detective mentioned his mother. This showed that he felt remorse and that he saw himself as a disappointment to his mom. But after he was done crying, he happily told the cop the whole story, almost as if he was eager to finally get it off his chest.
On Monday, when you got home from school, what happened, Nate?
We were talking, and then he said, I know how to get money.
Me and Nate did go to my grandma's
When?
Monday.
And he said he'd kill his grandma. But I thought he was just joking around with me.
Okay.
And then I asked my mom to take us to Sheboygan Falls. And I told her that we were going to meet up with one of our friends.
Bobby drove the two boys to Barbara's home, completely unaware of their morbid plans. Their plan was to sneak up on Barbara through the door, which led from the garage to the kitchen. However, Barbara heard the boys and invited them into the house, adding that she would call Antonio's mom to let her know that he was with her. When Barbara turned her back on Tino and Nate, she was brutally attacked.
With what?
Like hammer thing. And then like a hammer thing with an axe at the other end.
And what time was it on Monday?
I don't know, like probably like 4, 5.
Isn't it really, really sad that a person who's too young to say hammer and hatchet could come up with such a vile plan and actually stick to it? It's always hard to grasp that a kid could kill another person, let alone their own relative with a hatchet. And yeah, Antonio made a full confession too, after he was urged to tell the truth and match the police evidence. He even opened up about the motive.
And why was this done?
At first I wasn't wanting to. Like we were in our garage through one of the doors just like waiting.
Well, he did want to. It was his plan, and he and Nate had already made it to Barbara's address. But he got cold feet when Barbara saw them and greeted them like the loving person that she was.
And then we went in there, and then he had a plastic bag he put over his head, but he couldn't see out of it, so he just took it off. And then right as I was to open the door, his grandma like walked down and said, "Who is that?"
Barbara never suspected her family could have such intentions.
I'm standing behind the door, and she like because I like stepped on something, and then she said, "Come out." And I came out, and then she's like, "What do you do?" And then she asked us if we were cold, and that's why we were in the garage. And Tina said, "Yeah."
It's so sad that Barbara was kind and welcoming until her very last second, and Tino and Nate took advantage of her kindness. Antonio claimed he had Barbara because he panicked when she said she was going to call his mom. At that time, he was still a social care runaway. But then why was he at her house with a hammer and a hatchet? This screamed premeditation.
All right, where did you get this small axe or whatever that you were talking
From
about?
my garage.
From your garage? And where did Nathan get that hammer?
I think that was just in his house.
Yeah, definitely premeditated.
We were deciding if and how we were gonna do it, and then like how we would get a ride there, how'd we get a ride back, all that.
After he fully implicated himself in the murder of his great-grandma, Antonio was finally ready to reveal his actual murder motive, and it's a truly cold one.
And why did you go there and come up with the plan to do this?
I think it was mainly just for money.
Tino sounds like he's describing the most mundane thing ever. How chilling is it that a 13-year-old talks like this about their great-grandmother? And he didn't just kill her. Remember how the paramedics found her? Barbara's head was in. What's even sadder is the sum Tino and Nate got away with was $155. Is that what Barbara's life was worth? As in many cases where two people are involved, the boys tried to paint the other one as more responsible for the attack. Tino said he only hit Barbara once or twice, then he ran to the bathroom as he felt sick. But Barbara's autopsy showed at least 27 equally split between the two murder weapons.
How long were you back in the bathroom here?
Probably about 30 seconds.
And then what happened?
And I'm quite sure I went to the front, like over here, and then she wasn't like alive and we didn't know what to do and we were freaking out and we were probably there for like 2 hours not knowing what to do.
According to Nate though, it was Antonio who did most of the attack.
And then Tino started hitting her over and over again. And then he stopped. And he looked at me. And then he said, "Nate, help." And I was standing there.
Nate said he only followed Tino in the attack because he was afraid.
I didn't want to, but I didn't want to, but I didn't want him hitting me, so I hit her twice, and then I walked away. And then he kept hitting her, and then she was dead.
Imagine what Barbara went through in her very last moments, knowing she had trusted Tino with all her heart. Whoever expects their great-grandson to be a monster? After murdering Barbara, the boys tried to pick up her body, put it in the trunk of her car, and dump her in the lake. But they weren't strong enough to move the body, so they just dragged it for a few feet and left her in the garage. Tino covered the body with a blanket, stole $155, a bunch of jewelry, and 3 soda cans, and the two ran away with Barbara's car. The next day, Tino and Nate used the $155 to buy and pizza. Yeah, this is what Barbara died for. After the boys Barbara's sad bounty into their pockets and fled in her car, they dumped the unlocked car at a local bowling alley across the Sheboygan McDonald's. Inside the car, they left the few pieces of jewelry they had ransacked in hopes that someone would steal the car and then be implicated in her murder. They thought they were smart. But of course, there were fingerprints on the body, clothes in Antonio's school locker, and Barbara's gold watch at Nate's home. In January 2013, both boys were tried as adults. Tino entered a plea of not guilty by mental disease or defect. 2 weeks later, Nate also pled not guilty. Tino's attorney tried to have his trial moved because of the pre-trial publicity. When the motion failed, Tino switched his not guilty plea to no contest. This means a deal: life in prison with the possibility of parole in 35 years. He was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide. In June 2013, it was time for Nate's trial, and what do you know? Antonio testified against him.
Olson's great-grandson Antonio Barbeau and Barbeau's friend Nathan Paape. Barbeau pleaded no contest to first-degree homicide and took the witness stand today against his friend. As WISN 12 News' Marianne Lyle shows us, Barbeau says the attack was all for money.
We were going to try to scare her to get money and then use force if needed.
Okay. And when you say use force if needed, was there a discussion about what type of force you might use?
An attack, I guess to kill.
During Nate's trial, Antonio kept his story that he only hit Barbara twice. He claimed that Nate took the hatchet from his hand and hit Barbara with it several times after using his own hammer. This is why there were multiple wounds from both objects.
She knew I was on the run and she said she was going to call my mom.
What happened next?
We got in and then I looked to Nate and nodded and shook my head as in yes or no. He nodded and then I took the first swing.
Okay. And when you say that you took the first swing, is with the hand axe?
Yes, sir.
And as she was falling, were there any more blows? Did you strike her again?
I hit one more time as she was falling.
At any point, did you not have the hand axe during this incident?
Right after that, Nate took it and he used it, the blade side of it.
Is this a classic case of if I'm going down, you're going down with me? Nate was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole on his 45th birthday. A slightly lighter sentence for the boy who didn't come up with the plan. Antonio will be 50 when he gets his first chance at parole. But will Antonio ever get parole? He will always be the boy who once smiled for the camera right next to his great grandma, and the boy who decided to her for and pizza money.
The whole situation is just very sad for everyone. It's sad for our family. It's sad for the boys and for Nate's family too.
Nate's judge commented as he passed the sentence.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Nathan J. Paape, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
In my 24 years on the bench, I've not seen anything of this nature, not even close. Nate's great aunt Lori said that Nate had the social development of a 10-year-old, and this made him liable to be manipulated by someone like Tino, who showed psychopathic tendencies at such an early age. In a sad twist, Lori might be right. Nate thought he was going to go home after telling the truth to the cops. He didn't realize the gravity of the situation until he was actually taken to prison. Both boys shed a few tears in court.
I just want to say that I'm truly sorry for everything that happened. I truly regret every single thing that happened that day. Every single day that went by, I wish I could go back in time to stop everything from happening. That's it.
But were these remorseful tears or just the realization that they were going to prison for a very long time? Will they ever get parole? And should they? It would be a second chance at life, a chance Barbara never had. Thanks for watching, you guys. What do you think about this case? Do you know any other shocking crimes committed by young teens? Let me know in the comments, and before you go, make sure to like, subscribe, and click on that bell button so you never miss a new episode. See you next time, and take care.